Yo, I just want to try something different. I wanna better my speech. I wanna be able to articulate what I just said, or what I just read, I should say. So, yeah, I'm just gonna be reading 15, 30 minutes, depending however I want to read. And then right after I read, I'm just gonna briefly talk about what I just read to y'all. And yeah, I just like a little bit of a background. I've been reading for a little minute now. Here's all the books that I've read. Quite a few. I think I'm on to my 24th book. Right now I'm reading 7 Habits of a Highly Effective People. And yeah, I've kind of already started reading. So I'm a little bit of the head of the game, but I finally got to the first habit, which is be proactive. So yeah, I'm gonna start reading, and then after, we're just gonna discuss it. Obviously, I'm gonna read out loud and whatnot. Principles of personal vision. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by conscious endeavor. Henry David Thoreau. As you read this book, try to stand apart from yourself. Try to project your consciousness upward into a corner of the room and see yourself in your mind's eye reading. Can you look at yourself almost as though you were someone else? Now try something else. Think about the mood you are in now. Can you identify it? What are you feeling? How would you describe your present mental state? Now think for a minute about how your mind is working. Is it quick and alert? Do you sense that you are torn between doing this mental exercise and evaluating the point to be made out of it? Your ability to do what you do, your ability to do what you just did is uniquely human. Animals do not process this ability. We call it self-awareness, or the ability to think about every thought process. This is the reason why man has dominion over all things in the world, and why he can make significant advances from generation to generation. This is why we can evaluate and learn from other experiences as well as our own. This is why we can. This is also why we can make and break our habits. We are not our feelings. We are not our moods. We are not even our thoughts. The very fact that we can think about these things separates us from them and from the animal world. Self-awareness enables us to stand apart and examine even the way we see ourselves, our self-paradigm, the most fundamental paradigm of effectiveness. It affects not only our attitudes and behaviors, but also how we see other people. It becomes our map of the basic nature of mankind. In fact, we take how we see ourselves and how we see others into account. We will be unable to understand how others see and feel about themselves and the world. Unaware, we will project our intentions on their behavior and call ourselves objective. This significantly limits our personal potential and our ability to relate to others as well. But because of the unique human capacity of self-awareness, we can examine our paradigms to determine whether they are reality or principle-based, or if they are a function of conditioning and conditions. The social minor. If the only vision we have of ourselves come from the social minor, from the current social paradigm, and from the opinions, perceptions, and paradigms of the people around us, our view of ourselves is like the reflection in the crazy mirror room at the carnival. You're never on time. Why can't you ever keep things in order? You must be an artist. You eat like a horse. I can't believe you won. This is so simple. Why can't you understand? These visions are disjointed and out of proportion. There are often more projections than rejections, projecting the concerns and character weaknesses of people given the input rather than accurately reflecting what we are. The reflection of the current social paradigm tells us we are largely determined by conditioning and conditions. While we have acknowledged the tremendous power of conditioning in our lives, to say that we are determined by it, that we have no control over that influence, creates quite a different map. There are actually three social maps, three theories of determinism widely accepted independently or in combination to explain the nature of man. Genetic determinism basically says your grandparents did it to you. That's why you have such a temper. Your grandparents have short tempers and it's in your DNA. It just goes through the generations and you inherited it. In addition, you're Irish and that's the nature of Irish people. Psychic determinism basically says your parents did it to you. Your upbringing, your childhood experience essentially laid out your personal tendencies and your character structure. That's why you're afraid to be in front of a group. It's the way your parents brought you up. You feel terribly guilty if you make a mistake because you remember deep inside the emotional scripting when you were very vulnerable and tender and dependent. You remember the emotional punishment, the rejection, and comparison with somebody else when you didn't perform as well as expected. Environmental determinism basically says your boss is doing it to you, or your spouse, or that bratty teenager, or your economic situation, or national policies. Someone or something in your environment is responsible for your situation. Each of these maps is based on the stimulus/response theory we most often think of in connection with Pavlov's experiments with dogs. The basic idea is that we are conditioned to respond in a particular way to a particular stimulus. How accurately and fundamentally do these deterministic maps describe the territory? How clearly do these mirrors reflect the true nature of man? Do they become self-fulfilling prophecies? Are they based on principles we can validate within ourselves? Between stimulus and response. In answer to those questions, let me share with you the catalytic story of Viktor Frankl. Frankl was a determinist raised in the tradition of Freuderian psychology, which postulates that whatever happens to you as a child shapes your character and personality and basically governs your whole life. The limits and parameters of your life are set, and basically you can't do much about it. Frankl was also a psychiatrist and a Jew. He was imprisoned in the death camps of Nazi Germany, where he experienced things that were so repugnant to our sense of decency that we shudder to even repeat them. His parents, his brother, and his wife died in the camps or were sent to the gas ovens. Except for his sister, his entire family perished. Frankl himself suffered torture and innumerable indignities, never knowing from one moment to the next if this path would lead to the ovens or if he would be among the saved who would remove the bodies or shovel out the ashes of those fated. One day, naked and alone in a small room, he began to become aware of what he later called the last of the human freedoms, the freedom his Nazi captors would not take away. They could control his entire environment. They would do what they wanted to his body. But Viktor Frankl himself was a self-aware being who could look as an observer at his every involvement. His basic identity was intact. He could decide within himself how all of this was going to affect him, because what happened to him, or the stimulus and his response to it, was his freedom or power to choose that response. In the midst of his experiences, Frankl would protect himself into different circumstances, such as lecturing to his students after his release from the death camps. He would describe himself in the classroom in his mind's eye and give his students the lessons he was learning during his very torture. Through a series of such disciplines, mental, emotional, and moral, principally using memory and imagination, he experienced his small embryonic freedom until it grew larger and larger, until he had some freedom than his Nazi captors. They had more liberty, more options to choose from in their environment, but he had more freedom, more internal power to exercise his options. He became an inspiration to those around him, even to some of the guards. He helped others find meaning in their suffering and dignity in their prison existence. In the midst of the most degrading circumstances imaginable, Franklin used the human endowment of self-awareness to discover a fundamental principle about the nature of man. Between stimulus and response, man has the freedom to choose. Within the freedom to choose are those endowments that makes us uniquely human. In addition to self-awareness, we have imagination, the ability to create in our minds beyond our present reality. We have conscience, consensus, a deep inner awareness of right and wrong, of the principles that govern our behavior, and a sense of the degree to which our thoughts and actions are in harmony with them. And we have independent will, the ability to act based on our self-awareness, free of all other influences. Even the most intelligent animals have none of these endowments. To use a computer metaphor, they are programmed by instinct and/or training. They can be trained to be responsible, but they can't take responsibility for that training. In other words, they can't direct it. They can't change the program, and they are not even aware of it. But because of our unique human endowments, we can write new programs for ourselves, totally apart from our instincts and training. This is why an animal's capacity is relatively limited and man's is unlimited. But if we live like animals out of our own instincts and conditioning and conditions, out of our collective memory, we too will be limited. The deterministic paradigm comes primarily from the study of animals, rats, monkeys, pigeons, dogs, and neurotic and psychotic people. While this may meet certain criteria in some researchers because it seems measurable and predictable, the history of mankind and our own self-awareness tells us that this map doesn't describe the territory at all. Our unique human endowments lift us above the animal world. The extent to which we exercise and develop these endowments empowers us to fulfill our uniquely human potential. Between stimulus and response is our greatest power, the freedom to choose. Okay, I think I'm gonna take a pause there. What do we take away from this book? One thing that I had taken away from this book is the distinction of what was it called? Give me 1 second. It wasn't our environmental determinism. It was the one before that with our parents. Psychic determinism. And that basically says your parents did it to you. Your upbringing, your childhood experiences essentially laid out your personal tendencies and your character structure. I think I like that because one thing that always comes to mind about our the way that we go about life in general is always rooted back in how we grew up, whether it be with family dynamic, whether it be the certain disciplines that the parents gave you, even just the environment that you were in. Perhaps your parents were economically sound, perhaps they were not, but all those different things that your parents were upbringing you with had to do with a lot of how they kind of, mechanically structured your life, or I guess, and yeah, I don't know. I just found that to be very interesting, at least in today's day and age, and whatnot. So another thing that I probably, is cool to think about is the freedom to choose. I would say that I think the animal example versus humans is a good example, because an animal has a freedom to choose. The question is, does an animal have a freedom to choose what they want to do in life? And I would say to some degree they do, but to some degree they don't, because they have to survive. But for us humans, we have the freedom to choose how we want to approach life, if that makes sense. Yeah, we might have an upbringing from our parents, but once you get to a certain age, you are able to choose the way that you want to live your life. And I think that's more of a freedom than an animal. And I think that's the distinction that the book, that the author is trying to make between an animal and a human, or yeah. So this is my first video, so I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I appreciate you.